Hello, everybody. Good morning. I want to start off today. Sorry, I'm just getting the screen all set up here. Um, there we go. I want to start off today back in my garage, chilling out, having a good time. Put a little wax in my mustache today. See the little pointy points. All right. I want to start off today. Superintendent Leone reached out to everybody, all the teachers, and wanted to make sure that we all discussed with you before spring break. Um, we all discussed with you the importance of what's going on as far as social distancing and keeping yourself safe, right? It's pretty obvious by now that this is pretty serious. You most likely know, hopefully not, but unfortunately so, you probably know somebody, um, a friend, a family member, someone that knows somebody that's been affected by this pandemic thing we're going through. So, I mean, I know plenty. I have ex students that I still talk to, and one of my ex students who graduated just a couple of years ago just lost his mom to it, which is really really bad. Uh, and a student that I had quite a bit ago. He's around 27 now, 28 years old. Uh, him and his fiance are both positive, and they're not doing very well. They're really struggling. So I talk to him every day to see how he's feeling, and everyone knows somebody, or everyone can, whether they are a celebrity or someone in the family or somebody close to the family. Everybody knows somebody that's been affected by this. So Superintendent Leone wanted us all to get out there, all the teachers to get out there and say today how important it is to keep doing what you're doing, which means staying inside, which means social distancing yourself, not hanging out with friends, not going outside when you don't have to, right? We know the parks are closed. We know everything's closed. So with this week off coming, with this spring break thing where there's not going to be any contact with teachers on a daily basis, he's worried that you guys are going to get bored and you guys are going to go do something, and you can't. You got to stay inside. You got to stay close. You have to social distance. If you have to go to the store for your mom or for your brother or whatever, if your mom or your dad is going to drag you to the store for some reason to go food shopping because they need help, cover yourself with a mask, wear some sort of scarf, just put something over you. Be very careful. Don't go out for anything unless it's absolutely necessary. It's working slowly, but it's working. So he wanted us to give you that message, to talk to you. You guys already know this stuff. I know you guys are very smart and you're very careful, but um, Superintendent Leone insisted that we all talk about the importance of social distancing and, and staying inside and staying safe, because it's so easy, and it's all age ranges. Some people say teenagers, no, not going to get us. Like I said, I have a 27-year-old ex student who's really, really suffering right now. When I talk to him and I see him, I mean, you can tell he's having difficulty breathing and stuff. And also, you wouldn't want to give it to someone that you love. You wouldn't want to go out and play basketball or hang out with your friends somewhere and then come home and give that to a family member, to mom or dad or grandma or something. That would be horrible. But anyway, that is what I have to say about that. That is a requirement for me to talk to in all of my classes today, and I think it's very important. And you see me, I'm staying right by the house. I stand outside once in a while, but we don't go anywhere. We try to order our food, but it's really difficult because it's hard to order food. So, we are limiting. We haven't talked to anyone, we haven't been near anybody, which is kind of weird for a long time. All right, to the work today. So you are working, hopefully you are finished with that genetic engineering paper that you started quite a few days ago. Today we are moving on to another part of this called uh, deforestation and irrigation, and what the impact on agriculture is for those things. All right. So you should be on the slides right now. And I am looking at the slides, and I'm on slide one, which is just the title slide. So I'm moving to slide two, which is just the agenda. Slide three is the review, which you could do at your leisure. And slide four is the objectives and the intro. So after this lesson, you should be able to identify the impacts of deforestation and irrigation on sustainable agriculture. All right. So that's what we've been talking about. We've been talking about agriculture. We've been talking about different ways to agriculture. We've been talking about crop rotations. Excuse me. Crop rotations. And then we were talking about GMOs and genetic engineering. So here's just some background on some of this. I am on the next slide. I guess that's slide 5, right? I have to bring it up to full screen because it's hard to see. So it takes a second to do that. I will take a sip of coffee because my throat feels funny. All right. So it says, how does deforestation and irrigation impact agriculture? And what you see here when you click on it is dirt, is soil, right? Soil is the most important thing. I mean, one of the most important things when it comes to agriculture, if not the most important thing. We get our food from the nutrients in the ground. If there are no nutrients in the ground, we don't get food. It's that simple. And remember, 99.7% of all of the food supply globally is made on land, right? So it's not like we could turn to the sea and just eat fish. That isn't going to work. So I'm looking at this dirt. Dirt has different layers, right? The layers are different sizes in some places. In some places, there are missing layers due to erosion or due to weathering and stuff. But this is the basic layers. At the very, very top where you see grass, and you see, I'm looking outside right now out of my garage, and I see grass and I see leaves on the ground, right? That is called the surface litter. That just means all the fallen stuff, all the stuff that is right on the top. And partially decomposed. So I'm looking at a lot of old leaves right here that are just sitting on the surface. That's a partially decomposed organic matter, right? So that's the surface litter. The first layer of dirt from the very top that you can see to however far down it is, depending on where you are in the world, is called topsoil. Topsoil is the most important thing when it comes to growing stuff, because that's where we start our seeds and that's where a lot of the root system resides. Okay. So topsoil is organic matter, right? It's made up of organic matter, living organisms, and small rock particles. Okay. Next down, you have this thing called the zone of leaching. This is where anything that's designed to settle, they will settle down to this layer called the zone of leaching. Underneath the zone of leaching is called subsoil. Subsoil has large rock. You take a shovel and you start digging down in the dirt holes, decent size. That's the subsoil, where you get sort of larger rock particles. You also have organic matter, and you have inorganic compounds in there. Inorganic compounds meaning things like dirt and things. A rock particle is broken up. It's in bigger chunks. And then below that, you have something called a bedrock, which is a solid rock layer. It hasn't been affected by weathering or anything. So the deeper you dig, the deeper you dig, you will get through these layers, and eventually, if you dig deep enough, you hit the bedrock, which is a solid rock layer. All right. Again, some of these layers are missing in some areas of the world due to erosion or wind or whatever. But the topsoil is the most important part, and you can see that the first thing to be weathered away or eroded away would be topsoil. So when that happens, then you can't grow anything, because you really need topsoil to grow, because that's where that nutrient dense layer is. If you look over on the left of this, you'll see ants, right? So there's a lot of things that live in the topsoil, ants and worms, bacteria and fungi, right? Those first 3 and those first 4 you see, and even the rhizobium. Oops, I just advanced my slide by accident. The rhizobium bacteria. So all of these things on the left reside in the topsoil, right? And they all have very important jobs. The worms and the ants, what they do is they break up and aerate the soil. The topsoil needs to be fluffy, not so much fluffy, but it needs to have space in it. And the reason why it needs to have space in it is so when roots grow from plants, roots have a place to go, and it's not so that the roots can't penetrate through it. So it needs to sort of be a little fluffy, a little bit of air in it. So aerated is what they call it. And ants making their little ant farm things, and worms digging deep down are constantly aerating this topsoil. Okay, so that's very important. The bacteria and the fungi decompose the organic matter. So all the leaves that are on the surface now eventually get decomposed and move into the topsoil. And then the bacteria and the fungi will decompose that. They'll decompose dead plants. They'll decompose dead animals, right? Because that stuff all moves into the top layer, the topsoil. There's also rhizobiome bacteria, which we talked about when we talked about the nitrogen cycle. What that does is there's a lot of nitrogen in the soil. It will produce usable nitrogen for plants. So this bacteria hangs out on the roots of plants and takes the nitrogen, takes one form of nitrogen from the dirt and turns it into another form that plants that's user friendly for the plants, right? So all that stuff is very, very important. And you can see that it says, contrary to what you might see or believe, soil is very much alive. All right. I want to talk about that line because dirt is not alive. Dirt is abiotic, right? When we talk about biotic and abiotic, the dirt is abiotic, the actual dirt particles. But because there's so many living things in it, because there's so much organic matter in it, dead organic matter broken down, and nutrients and animals and bacteria and insects and all the stuff that lives in there, they refer to it as very much alive because there's so much activity going on in this area, right? The actual dirt is not alive, but there's so much life going on in there that they say the soil is very much alive. It's sort of a, just an expression kind of thing. All right, so I'm going to shrink this back down because I think I could see the next slide. That was slide, I believe it was slide 5. Oh, takes a second for this cut. Yeah, that was slide 5. Now moving to slide 6. I'm also going to put this in present mode because I can't really see it when it's shrunken down. Another second. And here we go. Okay, so when we look at what's going on this slide, slide 6, you can see what they're doing is giving you an idea of how much living stuff is in the topsoil over a certain area. Okay, so a couple things you need to sort of understand to get your mind around it is an acre. When you say you have an acre of land, an acre is about 75% of an American football field. So I think we've all seen football fields that are 100 yards long. An acre is about 75% of a football field, okay, American football field. A hectare, so that's another unit, right, of area. A hectare is approximately one. Get your mind around it when we start talking about what's in there, right? And a gram, that's another unit, right? A gram is approximately a teaspoon. So if you go grab a spoon from your drawer and you dig up a piece of dirt on that spoon, that's about a gram. So keep that in mind while we're going through this, all right? So look at the numbers of organisms in an average farm soil. Insects. If you take 1 hectare, so if you look out over 1.5 soccer fields, there's approximately 23 million insects just in that area alone. That's insane, right? If you include the arthropods with those insects, so that's like the beetles and other things, right? Those types of things, you're looking at 725 million arthropods and insects in an area that's the size of 1.5 soccer fields. 725 million. That's crazy. This is even crazier. Bacteria. If you go and you take a spoon and you dig some dirt, billion bacteria in that one tiny gram of dirt. Insane numbers. Algae, same thing. Go out, scoop some dirt, 1 little gram on a teaspoon, about 50,000 algae in that 1 little gram. You have about, again, a hectare, right? 1.5 soccer fields. You're looking at 1.5 soccer fields. There's approximately 6 million earthworms in that area. This is why they say the earth, the soil is very much alive, because forget it, there is more living things in 1 teaspoon of dirt than there is in the United States, humans. It's absolutely mind-blowing. The other picture you see here is the soil food web, so it kind of shows you what's going on. And you can read through that for the trophic levels, because we've done trophic levels in the past. All right, I'm going to shrink out of the full screen so I can see what's going on here. All right, so into slide 7. What was on slide 7? Oh yeah, so the main point there is the only thing it says there. Soil takes a great deal of time to accumulate and establish itself. We've kind of talked about that a little bit when we were talking about crop rotation the other day, where the soil needed time to regenerate. So soil takes a great deal of time. So soil doesn't just become fertile like overnight, right? Soil becomes fertile with nutrients over a very long period of time. So it's very we have to be very careful not to overuse the soil, like I mentioned on Friday, or like I mentioned the last time we met. We have to be very careful not to overuse it, because then we'll take all those nutrients out. That's not a good thing. Another thing is we also have to take care. That's what it says on this slide. We also have to take a lot of care to ensure that erosion doesn't remove it. All right. So there's a lot of things going on. Right? We have to give it time to regenerate itself. And we also have to take care not to erode, make sure the land doesn't get eroded. So make sure we're not farming in areas where there's a lot of water flow or a lot of wind or a lot of weather that could take that top layer off. Because if that top layer of topsoil gets removed, you're not growing anything. Well, that's not true, but you're not growing fertile crops that we can eat, okay? You're looking more along the lines of things like cactus and stuff that doesn't need a lot of water and a lot of moisture, but that's for another time. So soil is very fragile, right? Another thing, moving to slide 8, is that you also have to remember that, and I've been saying this, and you know this, you also have to remember that if you remember from our last unit, biomes and ecosystems, right? All biomes and ecosystems have different climate. They have different amounts of wind. They have different amounts of rainfall. They have different amount of temperature. So that's all going to lump in to the variables that have to do with the soil in that area. So depending on the biome and the climate, your soil is going to be rich, your soil is going to be not eroded, or it's going to be opposite of that, right? So you have to be careful. Now, there's this thing, the second bullet point here on slide 8 is slash and burn agriculture, okay? Slash and burn agriculture is an approach that people use when their land isn't fertile. So you saw a lot of this in different countries, not so much in America, but in different countries where people needed to grow things, whether it was out in the middle of nowhere, whether it was in a village scenario, whatever it was, they needed to grow stuff and the soil wasn't fertile. So what you can do, remember, so that topsoil is just made up of organic matter, dead organic matter, right? So they would slash a forest, a big section of forest. So they would undergo deforestation here. They would slash down a big chunk of forest and they would burn it. They would slash it and they would burn it. And burning it, what does it do? Burning it puts all the ash, puts a big layer of ash on the ground from all of this organic matter, the trees, the plants, the bushes, everything. And what it does is it ends up making the land super, super fertile, because it actually, all the dead organic matter puts all that nutrient back into the layer. So you make a layer of topsoil almost, right? By slashing all this stuff and burning it, you're making a layer of topsoil and you can plant in it. You can plant food in it that you couldn't plant before you slashed and burned. So people would do that, countries would do that. But again, we all know that that's not a good idea at all. One side, you need food. The other side, the deforestation. We can't do that. We can't cut down trees and make areas like that and burn them just so we have fertile soil. There's got to be other ways to do it, right? And then the last part of this slide says improper methods of shifting crop agriculture, including clear cutting, deforestation, and slash and burn agriculture, can eventually lead to desertification, right? So eventually it can lead to, no areas of trees with desertification. You deforest everything. You don't crop shift correctly. So now you have big chunks of land that will never get nutrient dense again. Well, not never, but super long time. So you don't do it right. So therefore you can't go back to that plot of land in the time that you want. So it makes a lot of empty, dead space. That's not a good thing. All right. So moving to slide 9, we see irrigation. So we've talked about the soil. We've talked about all the life in the soil. We've talked about how fragile soil is. We talked about the layers of soil. We talked about erosion, and we talked about deforestation and slashing and burning. Here comes the other variable, right? Irrigation is the approach which is often used in regions where soil doesn't receive sufficient moisture for the intended crop. We know this. If you're growing something where the rainfall is on average very good, and you're going to get a decent amount of rainfall, you don't have to worry about watering your crops as much, because that natural cycle of the water cycle is going to take care of keeping the soil moist, right? It doesn't happen all the time in all the areas of the world. Obviously, there's less rainfall in some areas. Some crops need less rainfall. Some crops need more rainfall. So it all depends on what you're growing, where you're growing it, right? But if you can't get that water cycle to be beneficial to you, you do something called irrigation, right? Irrigation is when you bring water into a place so you can water your plants. So that means that you use a river or you use groundwater, right? We know there's water deep under the ground. So sometimes you can drill a well and you can pump it up, right? And you can put it through and you can water the plants. Sometimes you can divert a river. You can actually cut a trough, right? Or pipe in from a river the water to wherever you are, and you can irrigate your crops, which is very, very important. The only problem here is that when it rains, that's part of the natural water cycle. It's a more natural process, right? There's hardly any salinity. There's hardly any salt in rainwater. But rivers and groundwater, they contain salt. Now, they don't contain a lot of salt, rivers and groundwater. Obviously, it's not like an ocean, which you can't use at all. But rivers and groundwater do have a higher salt content than rain, because remember, you have a river with some salt content, and when the water evaporates in part of the water cycle to move into the atmosphere, it doesn't bring any salt with it, right? The salt remains down in time in rivers and groundwater as well. That's not the best, because if you're irrigating using rivers and groundwater, then what happens is the soil eventually becomes salty. Saltification of soil. It means that all that water you use, that water evaporates and the plants use and the crops use that water, and what's left behind in the dirt is salt. And plants don't like salt. Plants don't like to grow in salt. So if the ground gets too salty, you screwed up the soil that way. So as far as growing crops and things like that. All right. I'm moving to slide 10. Slide 10 is the guided practice setup. So this is what you got to do, right? So you got an activity. It's called the cost benefits analysis. If you move to slide 11, it gives you more information. So what you're going to do is on the right-hand side of the slide 11 slide, you'll see a bunch of different types of irrigation. You'll see flood irrigation and drip. I can't see because I didn't enlarge it. Sub irrigation. You'll see the different types of irrigation there. You're going to choose one. So I suggest you look at a couple online, see which ones have a lot of information, see which one strikes you as interesting, and pick one of those, right? On a separate doc, which you're going to turn in for a grade, you're going to find a diagram or an illustration of your type of irrigation. I want to be able to look at it. I'm not exactly sure how every single one of these types of irrigation works. Like I have the gist of it, but I don't know exacts. So it'd be nice if I can look at this diagram and say, oh, okay, that's how sub-irrigation works. It goes here, 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 here. A nice labeled diagram. You know what I mean? So that's the first part of the assignment. And the second part of the assignment is to list the cost and benefit for your irrigation choice. So there's, to anything that you do, there's always costs and there's always benefits. Now, I don't mean just financial when I say costs. I mean costs on the environment, right? Is it going to require a lot of space? Is it going to require a lot of labor? Is it going to require a lot of money? The costs versus the benefits. It's going to be able to irrigate. It irrigates better. It takes care of some of the salt problem. Whatever the costs, and you can list that in a chart. I think most of you probably like doing that with bullet points. So you can just have on one side, you can have costs and you can have benefits on the other. And you can just bullet point each one of those. Try and get as many as you can. I don't know what I meant. It's not a minimum maximum thing, but I don't want you to give me one cost or one benefit. I want you to find a couple. And even if you can't find it, but you feel like, oh, this would be a cost or this would be a benefit, you can add your ideas in there too. Right? That's all I need from you. That is the slides. That is sort of the dirt issue, the soil issue, and how fragile it is. So hopefully that was a little bit helpful. I'm going to go because I got another class. I got 3 classes today in a row, so I have to get ready to do this exactly the same way. But I want you guys to enjoy spring break. This is the last time we're going to see each other until after spring break, which I'm a little worried about because after you get a whole week off and not checking your computer and all that stuff, make sure you get back on the day you're supposed to get back on. I don't want to go chasing people. But you guys are doing good. You guys are signing in. You guys are getting the work done. I'm going to keep using YouTube because as opposed to a live thing, as opposed to a camera thing like WebEx or like Google Hangouts, because it allows me to be able to lecture and interrupted It allows you to reach out to me via comment right here, which I'm staring at if you need to, right? The best part is it records it, puts it right onto the classroom. All anybody needs to do is click on it to watch it again, right? Unfortunately, well, understand you guys are super busy, and sometimes when I'm live, there's only 2 people watching it live, 5 people watching it live, 7 people watching it live, right? But because it records and because it goes to the classroom and because everyone knows that, by the time I check at the end of the day or in that evening or the next day, in a class of 28 students, I'll see that there were, 26 views or something. So people are getting to it. They're just not getting to it absolutely live like you guys are. So I'm going to keep using YouTube because it's super, super, super easy and convenient. I am live, so I can answer these questions that you put up here on the chat if you have it. All right. So I am out. I got to get ready. You are writing that, turning it in as soon as possible. I mean, until we meet again. Please be safe. Please continue to be bored and inside and playing video games and making TikToks and just staying inside. If you got to go outside, just stand out on your porch or your steps and just look around for a few minutes and then get back inside. There's really no reason to go anywhere. If you have to go somewhere, make sure you are definitely covering your face and your hands and all that fun stuff. Just be careful. And if you have somebody in your family that has to go out to work and comes back home, keep reinforcing to them that, look, you're going out in the world and you're doing all this stuff. Make sure you're washing your hands when you get home. Make sure you're wearing protection when you get home. Just be careful, be smart, because it really does transmit very easily. So I want you guys to be careful. But hopefully by the time we see each other again, there's going to be good news, and it's going to be getting to the point where maybe we can actually see each other live, like close live. That would be kind of cool. Anyway, I will talk to you soon. Take care.